everybody! Welcome back to my channel. If you haven't been here before, my name is Debbie and I read a lot of books. For Vlogmas this year I have been doing lots of books because I have read a lot, and it was back in June that I realised that I had plenty of videos to be able to do Vlogmas through November and December. So here we are. Today's book is called Cinder and Glass, and I was really intrigued by the front cover of this. I thought it would be a bit of an adaptation of Cinderella. Turns out it's very close to the original source material. But yeah, so I'll show you the front cover. It's by Melissa de la Cruz. There we go. But yeah, the fact that it's called Cinder and Glass and the way that the front cover is, I thought it was going to be leaning into the magical side of things a bit more. But no. There is a bit of a twist on the original story in there, with a little bit of a modern twist to it. I say modern even though it's, well, I'll read you the blurb and then you'll probably understand more where I'm coming from. 1682. The king sends out an invitation to all the maidens in France. Their presence is requested at a number of balls and events that will be held in honour of the dashing Prince Louis, who must choose a bride. Cendrillon de Louvois has more grace, beauty and charm than anyone else in France. While she was once the darling child of the king's favourite adviser, her father's death has turned her into the servant of her stepmother and cruel stepsisters, at her own chateau too. Cendrillon, now called Cinder, manages to evade her stepmother and attend the ball, where she catches the eye of the handsome Prince Louis and his younger brother Augusta. Even though Cendrillon has an immediate aversion to Louis and a connection with Augusta, the only way to escape her stepmother is to compete with the other women at court for the prince's hand. Soon, as Cendrillon grows closer to Augusta and dislikes the prince more and more, she'll have to decide if she can bear losing the boy she loves in order to leave a life she hates. This is published for young readers, so it's in young adult 13+, and it's in classics, fairy tales, fantasy fiction, romance and young adult. To be honest though, I think this is a book for all ages really, because at the heart of it, it's the story of Cinderella, which most people know. Because you're getting it from Cinder's point of view, and it's essentially almost like a diary form almost, because it doesn't use like old-timey language, it felt quite current, which is weird considering the fact that it's set in 1682. But as I was reading it, I didn't feel like I was in the 1600s. I find that the blurb is very misleading over what happens, because she doesn't actually go by Cinder. She introduces herself as Cinder at the ball to Louis because she's in a panic, because she's at the ball when she's not supposed to, as per the original story, and she doesn't want to draw attention to herself. So she's not actually referred to as Cinder throughout the book. Most of the time you're seeing her full name, which is Cendrillon, but that is actually the title of the original story. I say the original version, like it's older than the French story. They say that the version that is most widely known in the English-speaking world was published in French by Charles Perrault in 1697, and there's actually references to Charles Perrault in this story. Yeah, because this book is set in 1682, and that version was published in 1697, so it makes it feel like the French Cinderella story was inspired by real events. I'm not saying it was, I'm just saying this story makes it seem like that, because it's based in history. It's talking about like the real king and the real princes of the time, and then puts Cinderella's story into that point in history, which I thought was quite clever. I was very intrigued by the title, but it seems that the Cinder of the title refers to Cinderella, and the glass seems to refer to either Auguste or Louis. There is a tagline at the front of this bit that says that this is perfect for fans of Bridgerton, and I definitely feel that with the way the story is presented, because it's that whole thing of it's that time of the season. Obviously the prince needs to get married to become king, and so he invites everybody to the ball. But this story does start off with them as basically the beginning of the story is placed 1 year before Louis needs to find a bride. And so you see Cinderella as a 15-year-old, 14, 15, where her father is an advisor to the king, and as I said, there's no magic, so there's no fairy godmother. The woman who steps into the fairy godmother role is Cinderella's godmother, who Cinderella thinks that her father and her godmother are in love with each other, which you later find out quite possibly were, but the stepmother influences Cinder's father into marrying her, and then the godmother kind of runs away because she was in love with Cinder's father, and so she kind of just runs away, and Cinderella feels really angry about that. She's angry that her godmother has just run away when she needed her most, which is when her father dies. But yeah, so when you meet Cinderella when she's like 15, she is at court because her father is an advisor to the king, so she's taken into lessons to learn how to behave in front of royalty, and learn how to speak, and how to sit, and how to respond to the new world around her. And she, on her first day, takes her friends who work at her own chateau. There's a stable boy and a seamstress, and they explore parts of the castle that they're not really supposed to. She doesn't know she's not supposed to be exploring, but she does anyway. They end up in the orangery of the castle, and then 2 girls and 2 boys find them in the orangery and tell them they're not supposed to be there. So the 2 girls are very snotty, and then you've also got the 2 boys. One is kind of a nice boy and the other one is a bit mean. But yeah, you later find out that of the 4 children that they meet, that the 2 girls are going to become Cinderella's stepsisters, and the boys are sons of the king. So Louis, who you later find out is Prince Louis, and the younger brother is Augusta, who is an illegitimate son of the king, and so he is not really considered prince. He's allowed to live at the castle, but Augusta is kind of ashamed of his place in his family and the court because he's illegitimate. Because at the end of the book, you are given a proper timeline and influence for the book from the author, where she says how she inserted the fairy tale into the real story of the French royal family, and how Augusta, his mother, was actually the king's favourite mistress. But yeah, so I did enjoy the book. I just found it it's more on the simple side of the story, because it's just like, I think as somebody who does know the Cinderella story inside out, and I imagine most people who know the Cinderella story inside out will always be one step ahead when reading this, because they know what's going to happen. In regards to the relationship between Cinderella's stepmother and her father, you know what's going to happen there. Like, you know her father's going to die, and because you know her as the evil stepmother, you know the evil stepmother's motives and what she's going to do as the story progresses. It just makes it a lot more realistic in regards to the story, which was nice. And you know, it's 336 pages, and I felt like I did read this quite quickly. I think I read this over the space of about 2 days. But yeah, as I said, the blurb is kind of misleading because she only uses the name Cinder once at the ball, and to be honest, she goes to 2 balls, because she sneaks into a ball when she is younger, in like the year before when her father is still alive, and then after her father dies, her stepmother becomes even more evil. In regards to the stepsisters, one of the stepsisters is just as bad as her mother, but the other one, Alexandra, is actually quite sweet and is just easily influenced by her mother. Cinderella and Alexandra actually have quite a nice relationship. They actually grow a friendship, and it also leads to the part of the modern twist on the story. I say modern, it still would have happened back then, but I think is what makes it feel modern is the fact that there is an LGBTQ theme to this book in regards to one of the stepsisters, and so it's nice to see the representation in there, and it doesn't feel like it's been shoehorned in. It feels quite natural, because at first you see Alexandra and the seamstress kind of getting closer, and then you start to realise what's happening, and you're just like, oh, Alexandra and the seamstress are kind of falling in love here. and it adds to the relationship between Alexandra and her mother, because it makes Alexandra even more terrified of her mother if her mother finds out about it, and it does lead to a confrontation at the end. So it's not just Cinderella's story here, you're seeing one of the stepsister story here as well, and I think that's what's nice about more modern adaptations of the story. Nobody is just completely blanket evil. I mean, in this case, Prince Louis at first is portrayed as a bit of a brat, but then you see him grow up. In the blurb it says that Cinderella goes close to Augusta and dislikes Louis more and more. That isn't really the case, actually. She doesn't like Louis when she first meets him because he tells her off for being in the orangery and is a bit bratty. But when she meets him a year later, she realises he's grown up. And it's not that she hates him, she just prefers his brother. I've seen some reviews where they refer to the twist, but it's not a twist because it's in the blurb. The only way to escape her stepmother is to compete with other women at court for the prince's hand. Basically, at the ball, you find out that the Prince Louis is going to call out, is it like 24 or 25 names? Which is why part of the reason why Cinderella refers to her name as Cinder at the ball. But he calls out 25 women and tells them that they are essentially going to compete with each other for the royal hand. So, as I said, it's in the blurb. It's not really a twist, the fact that Cinderella is going to essentially be competing with other women. The fact that she is in love with Augusta, the fact that her stepmother is getting worse and worse whenever she's at home, means that she's at the point where she's going to do anything to leave that house. So when she finds out that her name has been called, because at first she just gives her name to Cinder at the ball, but then the royal advisors actually find out who she is, and they come to the house and say, "We know who you are. We are so sorry that we didn't realise where you were, because as daughter of the king's advisor, everybody thought that she'd been sent off to live with an aunt that didn't exist." Well, I say didn't exist, she passed away. But nobody realised that she was being held captive in her own chateau by her stepmother, living in the attic. And yeah, so when the advisors come to the house and say, Cendrillon, we apologise for not knowing where you were. You are officially in line to possibly have Louis's hand in marriage. So we are going to bring you to the castle. We're going to make sure that you're completely involved in the process. When the stepmother finds out, that's the point when Cinderella is like, oh, actually, even though I'm in love with Louis's brother, I can't not take part in this because I have been chosen. Louis did call my name at the ball, and so I am going to take this seriously and see what I can do to get out of this house unscathed. Which doesn't quite work out because you see the stepmother kind of putting on her fake niceties, and you later find out what the stepmother and the wicked stepsister does to try and get Cinderella out of the way. That's where it starts to get darker, because after all these talks throughout the book of like love potions and poisons, the poison comes back to bite everybody on the arse. Cinderella does overhear her stepsisters arguing over some sort of potion. And at first Cinderella thinks it's a love potion that's going to be used on Louis. There's not any real magic in this. There's talks of like voodoo and stuff, like as it would have been back then. But you realise that it's not real. There's actually a comment where they say, oh, like the witches and the potions aren't real, but poison is real. Just remember that going into this book. The magic isn't real, but the poison is. Even though it is aimed at a younger audience, as a 33-year-old woman who enjoys the story of Cinderella, and I've seen many different adaptations of that story. Even Bridgerton, one of the Bridgerton books, is very Cinderella story-esque. At times, Cinderella did feel quite naive, but at the same time, you know, she was 15 when her father passed away, and I think that does stunt her a little bit. And no matter what, you will always feel sorry for her when you realise what her stepmother is doing. To be honest, as I was reading it, I had like one of the newer versions of Cinderella in my head, specifically the Camila Cabello version. I don't know why. You think I'd be going to the Disney side of it, but no. If you haven't seen the Camila Cabello version of Cinderella, it's a bit of a jukebox musical, and it kind of gives it does go down the route of like nobody is truly evil. When you look at the stepmother's intentions, she just wants all of them to have a good life. Even when Cinderella was proposed to, the stepmother goes into that this is good for you, you know, whereas in traditional tellings of the Cinderella story, the stepmother is just trying to stop Cinderella from actually getting out of the house and becoming royalty. In the Camilla Cabello version, the stepmother actually gets quite excited when she finds out that Cinderella was at the ball and that the prince has fallen in love with her, because even though she has treated her horribly for so long, at the same time she's trying to prepare all of her daughters for life out of the house when they are married. So in that version, the stepmother actually goes into, but this is good for you, you know, you can go off and get married. But in that version, Cinderella just wants her own business. And so the Camilla Cabello version doesn't end up with that idea that love is the be-all and end-all and marriage is the be-all and end-all. Even though the prince and Cinderella do end up together, they just want to run away together and she wants to sell her dresses. How has this gone on to me reviewing the Camilla Cabello version of Cinderella? As I said, I did enjoy this book. It wasn't quite as modern as I thought it was going to be. It wasn't quite as twisty as I thought it was going to be, as I said, because I know the story so well. I saw the majority of it coming. But yeah, ultimately it was a sweet book, and yeah, the blurb lies to you. The blurb lies to you because she's not called Cinder throughout the book. She only uses that name once. And she doesn't hate Louis. She hated him when she was 15, when she first met him, but then they actually grow to be quite friendly and they actually get along with each other when he's courting her. Because at the end of the blurb it says that she grows closer to Augusta and dislikes the prince more and more, and she'll have to decide she can bear losing the boy she loves in order to leave a life she hates. That second part is true. She does have to consider losing Augusta if she wants to marry Louis to leave the chateau in which she has been brought up in. But actually, when the prince is courting her and figuring out whether he wants to marry her, he apologises for how he was when they first met. And even though that first date is a bit weird because he takes her around a maze and then runs off thinking that Cinderella's right behind him, even though she's there going, Louis, where are you? I'm in a maze. And she's trying to figure out how to get through this maze while he's just run to the middle of it, completely forgetting that she's behind him. They do actually have a conversation where he apologises for his behaviour when they first met, and they do actually create a friendship, and that's what makes it harder for her when it comes to choosing between Louis and Augusta, because she loves Augusta, but at the same time she feels that she could have a marriage with Louis, because ultimately she has made a friendship with him and she realises it is her best bet of getting out of the house. That is what this story is. You've got that Cinderella story in there, but it's ultimately Cinderella is choosing between friendship and love in order to escape an abusive step-parent. You can understand why somebody would choose the friendship over the love. It's wondering which one she's actually going to take in the end. Yeah. Cinder and Glass by Melissa de la Cruz. That is the front cover. Lovely book. And I will say that if you do like Bridgerton, you will like this book, because it just has that same kind of feel to it. I imagine if there was ever any like a film or TV adaptation of this book, I could feel it going down the using modern music in the ballroom scenes like Bridgerton does. Good book. Predictable because it's a classic story, but ultimately I did enjoy it. So thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not already. I will see you tomorrow with another video. Mwah.